Well, when it comes to theme parks the last few years, we've seen our share of incidents where guests are not behaving, I guess you could say, in the most appropriate ways between people being, unruly, people getting in fights, people drinking too much. There's things that guests do that can impact the experience for everybody else around them. And theme parks have begun looking at many ways to mitigate these issues and to help their personnel be more efficient in not only, reacting to these issues, but perhaps even preventing them. And we have a story from Orlando Park Stop by Alicia Stella that is talking about Universal has patented or filed for a patent for a new technology that would involve using AI and some sensors to help on this issue. So I'm not really sure how I feel about this, but we're going to read through this article and give some thoughts on it because it's a very interesting one. So, hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic. And again, this is from Orlando Park Stop and Alicia Stella. And it says Universal patents technology to detect line jumping and other disruptive guest behaviors. It says Universal has filed a patent application for a technology that would place sensors around a theme park. These sensors could use machine learning, AI, basically. They don't want to say it, but it is AI, to detect unruly guests and track rule breakers with the aim of improving the guest experience for others. This possible technology would utilize many sensors that can detect motion, temperature, sound, smoke, liquid, and more to monitor park areas and rides for disruptive or dangerous behavior. The patent gives many examples, including line jumping, disruptive actions by inebriated guests, smoking in non smoking areas, and getting out of moving ride vehicles, among other things. And so they've got a diagram here the way this would work. The sensor would receive data associated with something they've told it to watch out for, process the data, analyze the received data to identify activities/behaviors performed by one or more individuals, compare identified activities and behaviors to stored behavior models to determine activities that may have a negative effect on an aspect of the amusement park, and then initiate localized action to limit activities and behaviors outside of behavior threshold value. So basically, it would be a way to then alert, a team member and go over there and at least look at the situation and see if it's something that needs to be addressed. So the technology overview says in an application originally filed in 2022 with the United States Patent and Trademark Office and then updated recently this year, Universal has named the technology Amusement Park Interactive Guidance System. This application is still pending and has yet not been granted a patent as of this writing. In broad terms, the application describes the technology as an amusement park monitoring system comprised of sensor devices configured to acquire data related to one or more individuals within an amusement park, a memory storing instructions, and a processor. The intention is to limit actions by certain guests that may negatively affect the enjoyment of the theme park for others. Says the excerpt from the patent application below explains the concept in broad terms. Says amusement park, e.g. theme park, personnel are tasked with monitoring amusement park attractions, guests, and other aspects of the amusement park. An increasing number of amusement parks are employing sensor devices within and or around the park to capture data related to various aspects of the amusement park. It is now recognized that acquired data can be indicative of certain activities and or behaviors. Further, there is a demand for use of such data in deterring or discouraging certain activities and or behaviors, thereby facilitating amusement park enjoyment for guests of the amusement park. Accordingly, present embodiments are directed to an interactive guidance system that detects certain activities and or behaviors performed by one or more individuals and localizes the action to address the activities and or behaviors, thereby limiting limiting an amount of interference with other guest experiences. The technology would keep records of acceptable parameters for guest behavior, and when specific people are detected acting outside of these acceptable levels, an action is taken. This could be accomplished by simple things like automatically warning the guest via a loudspeaker or more harsh punishments like expulsion from the park. It says, for example, data from different sensor devices may be assembled and analyzed to identify certain activities performed by one or more individuals associated with an amusement park attraction. The identified activities may be compared to a behavior model, which may correspond to various behavioral threshold values. Upon determining that a particular activity exceeds preset behavioral threshold values, the system may initiate an action to limit the activity performed by one or more individuals without impacting other individuals using the amusement park attraction. It should be noted that exceeding a preset behavioral threshold value may include exceeding the threshold value either direction, such as, one, for example, a negative threshold may be exceeded in a negative direction. It says a simple example of how this detection system could be utilized in a theme park is to alert team members when a guest jumps off a moving ride vehicle. Another example includes a guest using a long object like an umbrella to reach outside of the safety envelope of a ride vehicle. These actions could automatically cause a ride system to stop or alert a team member depending on the severity of the action. So, sensor examples, illustration, explanations within that patent application discuss several types of sensors that could be placed around a theme park. Each of these sensors include at least one example of how it could be utilized within a theme park environment and its descriptions that paint a picture for how Universal would intend to use this possible system. Motion sensor, as explained in the example, a motion sensor could detect a guest moving on an attraction or even jumping out of a ride vehicle, which could be dangerous for them or other riders. There's a temperature sensor. A section in the document describing how a temperature sensor could be used gives us a first of many mention of how to detect inebriated guests. So this one is interesting. So the temperature sensor detects a temperature of a desired medium. Thus, the temperature sensor may be configured to measure the temperature of air or a specific surface. Further, the temperature sensor may be configured to measure the temperature of one or more guests within the amusement park. The temperature measurements may be used to assess certain physical conditions associated with a guest. For example, the temperature sensor may detect an elevated temperature of one or more guests, which may be indicative of the guest not feeling well. With either fever or inebriated, it is contemplated herein that the temperature sensor may be associated with one or more amusement park attractions. It may be disposed within or around the amusement park attractions and or in more components. Very technical lingo there, but sound sensor. A sound sensor could detect yelling, cursing, and other disruptions. Smoke detector. A smoke detector sensor obviously going to see smoke for non-smoking areas. Liquid detector sensor. Could detect spilled beverages on a ride. Camera sensor. Cameras could detect specific motions like fighting, drinking, yelling, running, etc. Guest profiles and tracking. This is where it gets a little iffy for me, but we'll go through this and talk about it. So, since the document is explaining how a new type of technology would work, part of it explains other components in addition to sensors. One of these components could be for the storage of data. The example given explains how certain individuals could have a guest profile on file, which tracks and logs their actions during their visit to the park. This information could be used to determine whether it's important to track their actions when they return to the park at a later date as well. In other words, it sounds like the system could keep track of who it deems to be troublemakers. And this gets into the really interesting part here where AI comes into the mix. It says guest profiles and tracking. To make some sense of the data, another component of the system may be machine learning, basically AI. Now, the document seems to go out of its way to not use the term artificial intelligence, but it seems that is what is being described on how it could use learned patterns to determine what types of behavior are outside of normal parameters. I mean, I'm sure they're not using the term artificial intelligence because it comes with, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about, when it comes to AI and things, but machine learning is what artificial intelligence is. And really, like, I come from before doing YouTube and, podcasting, things like that. Like, I've done a lot of things in the, I guess you could say technology realm of things. So AI or machine learning, it's not really brand new. It's been around for a decade or longer. It's just now kind of gone mainstream. If you've got things like OpenAI, Chat GPT, all these different ones that have kind of become mainstream now and done it, but it's not really brand new. And essentially, you could create your own AI that you could teach it to look for specific things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like Terminator scenario. It could just mean teaching a system essentially to, look for things like they're talking about in here. Combining data from multiple sensor types could help the system to determine specific scenarios like whether or not a guest is too drunk to continue drinking. Automatically compiling data from facial recognition or cameras, the system could count how many beverages a guest has consumed and cross-reference that data with collected by sound sensors that have detected disruptive yelling to determine that the guest is likely in an inebriated state. Tracking a guest allows the system to keep track of how long they may remain in a specific area as well. That could determine if someone is loitering in front of an attraction, spending too much time in a restaurant, or hanging out in a bar too long. Again, another factor in tracking whether someone is drinking too much at the park. I've never heard the term loitering in a theme park, but it seems like this is all directed in the way of people drinking too much and being disruptive, I suppose. So they got another diagram of here of, how the system would likely work. It says when actions could be taken. While a lot of the document talks about how to mitigate drunk and unruly guests, there are some simple practical applications that could be utilized for specific types of attractions as well. One example seems tailor-made for the VillainCon Minion Blast attraction at Universal Studios Florida. The document describes a situation where guests are expected to remain in place on a moving walkway attraction, but may run forward or move too far out of their designated area. If these actions are detected, the system can automatically trigger an automated message over a speaker system or even stop the ride automatically until the guest stops moving in a way that is interfering with other guests. Having witnessed it myself, this is a common problem on the Minion Blast shooting attraction, where team members must remind guests to stay in place during the ride multiple times. I've seen that as well. I suppose in terms of theme park attractions, it's kind of unique in that way of if you've never been on it, there's a conveyor belt that, kind of snakes its way around and you shoot things, but you're supposed to stay. It's got footprints to show you where you're supposed to stay. There's some of them go around corners where I could see sometimes, you could lose your footing maybe a little bit, but it is unique in the way because most rides, you're sitting, you're strapped in or something along those lines. This one is very much like people can move around, so that can cause issues on that one. While an automated message or even an automatic way to stop a ride for safety reasons seems like a simple usage for this technology, more complex guest behaviors may require a team member to step in to handle the disruption. In one example, guests may be attempting to jump in line or run in a queue. A possible consequence for these actions in the document is to send these guests back to the start of the line. Repeat offenders would be asked to leave the park or have other restrictions placed on their guest profile automatically by the system. Now, automatically is one thing that gets a little iffy. You're talking about potentially like a computer system or AI just determining certain factors. Like this is some of the stuff where and we'll talk about more at the end, but I get what the whole system is going for. But if these things are just completely automated, I could see where you run into some potential problems there. In terms of like things that are determined to be disruptive behaviors and such. Guests who are determined to be too drunk for the system could consider them at acceptable levels, may be locked out of purchasing or consuming additional alcoholic beverages until a specific amount of time passes. In an age where park rules and regulation signs are being displayed more prominently, explaining how harassment of employees or hate language will not be tolerated, the system could be configured to use sound sensors to detect specific words or phrases said by guests. That's part of it where it gets a little, again, you're talking gray areas here. Is it, I understand people yelling and, saying really loud, mean things, bad things, curse words, at other guests, at team members and such. But does it go to the line? Let's say you're in line and, a couple of friends are talking, they say an off-color joke to each other. Like, is that going to be monitored? Things like that become where how much privacy do you have in a theme park? I can see potential, issues arising out of that. The document seems to describe a system that would help alleviate a lot of the manpower needed to monitor guests on rides and in the park on surveillance monitors, while also ensuring some negative behavior is not slipping through the cracks. It's clearly not meant to replace security personnel or team members, but instead assist them in keeping disruptions to a minimum. While most of us expect to be watched by cameras at all times in the controlled environment of a theme park, the creation of guest profiles in a database where an algorithm adds new data automatically based on preset parameters may seem a bit alarming. Yeah, that's the part where I think if it's done automatically by an AI system, that becomes, I can see a lot of issues again arising out of that. It is not known whether the system as described is in use at Universal theme parks, but individual technologies like pressure masks to detect when someone gets out of a ride vehicle within a Disney park have been in use for decades. So, okay, first off, I completely understand using technology, and I'm not necessarily against AI by any means. Like I use it a lot of, for doing things on the YouTube channel and other things. Like you can use AI to help be more efficient in a lot of ways. So I understand the usage of it and really helping to, something that collects data and sorting through that data that can be done much quicker with an AI, again, a machine learned system to, determine data and things like that. And really, there's a lot of reason they would want to do this. Again, theme park fights have become a thing that the past few years that have really sprung up. We've seen some really bad ones, SeaWorld. And now I don't think Universal Studios that I'm aware of has had, I'm sure there have been some. The other night, my wife and I were at Halloween Horror Nights, and somebody was getting kicked out, or a group were getting kicked out because they seemingly had gotten to a fight. There were police involved. So I know it does happen, but in terms of, a giant brawl getting caught on camera, being put on social media. For instance, like the one that out in Disneyland a few years ago, where you had an entire family just brawling with each other in the middle of Fantasyland. There's been fights at Disney World as well. So even though it's not necessarily the theme park's fault that these things happen, but if a big fight breaks out, that's going to be it's bad on the brand. It's in a way, this is almost like brand reputation management, because even though it's not the theme park's fault necessarily, a lot of people may look at that and go, oh, I don't know if I want to take the kids there. There's been a lot of fights there. So I understand, obviously you don't want other guests to be impacted or be, witness this or be involved in these things. So I understand wanting to use systems to, mitigate that and just deal with these situations if and when they arise very efficiently by sending, team members over there. So I understand that. And I think it has a lot of potential good uses. I think what it would really come down to is the automatic guest profile. Now, again, I'm not against having a guest profile on people that are, causing problems in a theme park and say, hey, okay, we're not going to like kick them out this time, but keep an eye on them if and when they come back. The cameras see that they're in the parks. Let's keep an eye on what, for the most part, most people coming through a theme park are perfectly fine. They're there to have a good time. Much like all the people watching this channel, I'm sure you don't go to theme parks and cause disruptions. But all it takes is, one person or one group in a theme park to really cause problems for anybody else and team members at that park. So I understand in a way of the spirit of that, of saying like, okay, we're going with these people come in, we're going to keep an extra eye on them. And if they continue to break the rules, perhaps they then are, kicked out or they're banned or whatever that action may be. But I think when you go into automatically the AI is just going to create this guest profile and add data to that, I feel like you got to have some oversight on this and people looking at that, because again, AI does make mistakes, and again, it's getting better, but you could, let's say you caught up with your, this happens sometimes in, families, but like say you get into line and you catch up with your family in line and nothing egregious, but it's just a few spaces or something. You went to the bathroom, got something to drink, came back in line or something. Could that be perceived as cutting in line, and then automatically you have a guest profile? There's situations where you could see where false positives, if you will, where people aren't really breaking the rules, but like it gets determined by the AI that it is. So I think on its face, again, I don't know really how I feel about it. I'm not against the use of technology and the use of necessarily AI, but I think it definitely needs some human oversight. And you need to be able to look at that and make some, determinations, which that likely may be the case, as they say, okay, if the AI collects this data, somebody looks it over and looks and says, oh yeah, this is there. They were doing that. They started a fight here, like stuff like that. So I think in terms of theme park safety, guests trying to have a good time, not having their experience ruined by other people, I completely understand them looking at doing this and utilizing the technology to do so. I just have some questions in terms of how the, I guess, final determination could come into hand. But, I completely see it where, if they notice people yelling and screaming, you automate the speakers coming in. You can tell team members, hey, go over to Rip Ride Rocket. Somebody over there is smoking in line, or somebody is getting aggressive with somebody else. So you can mitigate a lot of behaviors. And even if this is a system where they utilize it, but there's warnings and says, hey, we have a behavior monitoring system in place, you could prevent a lot of things just by having it, be known there. So people talk about all the time of home burglary systems. If somebody sees that, they don't mess with that house, even if it doesn't have one, because they think, oh, it could have a system, it could be alerted, I don't want to mess with that. So you could mitigate a lot of the behaviors with just a system warning that is there. I'm interested in the technology of it on just the geek side of me in terms of how this would work and everything like that. But I'm not surprised to see it. I think you'll probably start seeing a lot more stuff like this in theme parks, because again, fights breaking out, it's bad for the brand. It does, it impacts other people's experiences in the theme park. So, and really Disney probably, they have technology in place that they use in the parks that they, nobody probably really knows about. I know years ago there was a patent, and I don't know if they actually ended up implementing it, but where it would track your shoes when you walk in, so they could tell where you're at in the park, by having different things that would see, like they could see where you were at different times by your shoes and things, which sounds crazy in many ways. But, also theme parks want to monitor how people flow through a park. They want to, they want a good theme park flow. So a lot of this is security, but also some of it could be park flow, getting people around. And obviously people are causing issues to people to deal with that as quickly as possible. Think about over at Epcot at Disney, people around drinking around the world. Epcot, at night, people getting too drunk. Like this has happened numerous times. So you potentially could, mitigate a lot of those issues. When you're in a theme park, I think most people accept that you are being monitored. Again, over at Halloween Horror Nights the other night, when you walk into a house, I mean, you can see the monitor. They've got cameras all over the place looking for people being disruptive, and or if something were to happen. So I think most people accept they are being monitored on some level. But the one that makes me the iffiest is the sound one, in terms of like, obviously, again, if people are yelling and screaming, that's one thing, but like, is it monitoring conversations? And let's say you're just having a conversation with your spouse and it picks up something, like, does that get marked? There's just certain things where you can really easily get into the really gray areas of like, okay, like, we don't need to be eavesdropping on conversations, or things like that. I would guess I'll wait and see. I don't know if they'll ever come out and say they're implementing this system. I would assume if they did, they'd probably have signs up and talk about it. But Universal has been using a lot of this stuff. They have facial recognition technology to get into the parks now. So I suppose on some level they could be tracking your face even all throughout the parks. Now, I'm not aware of that case, especially at bars and things like that. But, especially as Universal continues to grow, and as, they're really getting aggressive in the Orlando theme park market, going up against Disney, and getting more popular. One of the things I'm sure they don't want to happen is some sort of major incident where, it really would put a bad, name on them, and cause guests to be hesitant to want to come. And there's been a lot of talk, as basically every year, but teenagers at Halloween Horror Nights causing problems. There's been lots of reports about some team members getting injured, some teens being unruly in groups. So I can see this being used as a way to not only guest satisfaction not being impacted, but also the safety of your team members. So I'm not surprised to see this type of system, and I think on its face, I like the idea of it in terms of it's going to mitigate a lot of these behaviors, because it's not a good time when you see this stuff like that. I've never seen a full-on fight in a theme park. I've seen it come close. I've seen people pushing, and you think it's about to happen, but it didn't. But these things are not something that anybody wants to experience, especially with your kids or your family. It can be really upsetting to witness something like that when you're just trying to go have a good time, enjoy yourself, which is what 99% of guests do. It's just a lot of these things are for the 1% that kind of just mess it up for everybody else. So, like I said, I'm not necessarily against it. I definitely think there needs to be human oversight on this, and ways in which that things could, instead of just being automatically added to a profile, like, do you get warned about it when that happens? I'm not 100% like all in on it. I'm just like, okay, I'd like more details how this would work, and really like ways in which that perhaps there's some checks and balances with a system like this. But I guess we'll have to wait and see if this gets implemented, if the patent gets approved and everything like that. But either way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments what you guys think about this. I feel like this may be a pretty divided topic here. Whether you think this is a good idea, do you think this is a bad idea, or you're like me, you're just sort of like, well, wait and see, and like to see more details about this. And until next time, we will see you in the parks.